had to put the thing. She's so cute.
Okay, welcome to Colloquium, and since John Knudsen Martin is ready, we'll start. We'll introduce today our two speakers, and let's see if I'll do this alphabetically, so that by last name.
Okay, I was going to say.
That takes some thinking.
And how do I do this? Okay, so to my left, we have Ronda Fritz, and Ronda is, which is kind of interesting, I didn't know this. She's a native of Eastern Oregon, and she was born and raised in the area and lived here most of her life. She graduated from Powder Valley High School. How many were in your graduating class?
10, and I married one of them.
I like that. That's pretty good. She has a bachelor's in elementary education and a master's in education, reading from Boise State University, so she didn't venture too far from home. And I quote, she is dangerously close to finishing her Ph.D. in special ed from the University of Oregon. So congratulations. August is the date. Defense, so we have good thoughts for her as the summer progresses. Before going back to get her Ph.D., she was an elementary language arts reading teacher for 19 years. I really like that you spent all that time in the classroom, because I think as a teacher of teachers, you have so much to fall back to and to help them understand. Current research interests include reading interventions, the relationship between behavior, both the teacher and student behavior. There's a lot about teachers that and academic outcomes and teacher preparation. Very interesting. Okay, so to my right is Rae Ette Newman, who earned her doctorate at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas in 2013. And I thought, what happened in Las Vegas? Well,
They let one of us out.
they did let, and aren't we lucky?
Yes.
Yes, in special education with an emphasis in early childhood education. That stuff is so interesting to me because it's so critical in the development of an individual. To what
Absolutely.
happens in those early stages of life. She received her master's in ed in 2006, again from the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and yet you remain. With an emphasis in autism and cognitive disabilities. She received a BA from the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. I always love that word. And with a dual major in education, pre-K through grade 3, and special education, early childhood, birth to 8. She is the coordinator of the early childhood education program in the Master of Arts in Teaching in Elementary. That's a heavy load. And she teaches in both the undergraduate and graduate programs here at Eastern. And the tag team here today is going to talk about how we get our students to complete their reading assignments, and I'm all ears, because if you're anything like my students, it's a challenge to get them to read. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So the impetus for this became when Rae Ette and I were commiserating last spring about this problem where you walk into class and you pose this question that could be easily answered but through the readings that you have assigned before, and you get blank stares.
The glaze.
So I assume that has happened to others before, but maybe it was just us. So we started talking about different ways that we could motivate students to complete those readings. So here's a quote that I thought was super important to think about. When students don't do those readings, then they really are hindering their acquisition of knowledge, and it's an important piece of what we do in our classes. So the purpose of what we were doing was to try to figure out how we could help them do that, because what I do in the classroom every day, those activities are highly dependent on whether or not they've read and have that knowledge they need to complete those discussions, or if there's some sort of application activity they need to do. If they don't have that background knowledge, it's nearly impossible to complete that. So talking to Steve beforehand, he said one of his solutions is to just have them read it in class, so then you know they're getting the content that you want them to get. And that is always an option, and one that I have used. However, we wanted to know, were there some assignments we could give them that would motivate them to read? Were they necessary? Do they have to have an assignment in order to actually do the reading? Which ones would they be more likely to read in depth and get a deeper knowledge through the reading, and whether or not they would actually work. So with that, Rae Ette's going to tell you about what we did.
Okay.
Oh, I went too far. No, I didn't.
Thank you. So what we did is, because we get along so well, we decided that we would do this together and jump into this idea of trying to figure out what we can do to get our students to read our assignments. So between the two of us, we had both undergraduate and graduate classes, both online, hybrid, and face-to-face classes. So we have the gamut of everything that we do here at Eastern Oregon University. So when we looked at our classes and when we put them together, we had 20 undergraduate students in our face-to-face classes. We had 46 undergraduate students in 4 online classes, and then we had 14 graduate students in 2 hybrid courses. So this incorporates our early childhood program, our Quest program, and our MAT program here on campus. So we have a good variety of students participating in this. Our methods for this, we have 2 different types of assignments that we used. We use content-based and we use motivationally based assignments. And we're going to talk about each of those in just a little bit as soon as we get past the slide. But what we wanted to do is we did we did content, we did motivation, and then we did a combination of the 2. So we rotated these assignments weekly. So whatever we did on week 1, we did again on week 4, 2 and 5, 3 and 6. So we just cycled through these assignments continually over the term. After the term, about week 9, 10, we had students come together and, well, as part of this assignment is they had to complete a survey, which was actually adapted from textbook reading in this course survey. So that's what that's about. And the different types of readings that we assigned, or assignments that we assigned, we're going to start with the motivationally based. Motivationally based assignments are those that students want to do because they get deeper into the content. So the first type of assignment we assigned was a 3-2-1. And when we talk about a 3-2-1, it's as simple as students deciding 3 things that they learned from the assignment, 2 things that they found interesting, and then 1 question they have after reading that. So that was the first assignment. The second assignment was a double entry journal. And what students had to do was identify 5 to 7 quotes that they found interesting from the reading on the left side. On the right side of the page, they had to indicate an extension, a question, or a response to that quote. So how did this quote relate to them? What questions do they have about it? And they got to choose 5 to 7, any quote from that reading from the week. And the last one was a student summary and a discussion board. So what the students had to do is after reading, each student was assigned 1 week where they had to write up a summary and post 2 to 3 questions based on that reading, and they had to facilitate the discussion board for that week for their students. Students were split up into small groups, so they only had about 3 or 4 students per week that they were in charge, and they were only in charge 1 week of the term. So the weeks that they were not in charge, they were then called the participants. If they were not the participant, they were called the facilitator. So that's the motivationally based assignments. And the content-based assignments are those where students really have to focus in on the content. So first they had a reading guide. They had specific things that they were looking for within the reading. The second assignment was reading questions. We had specific questions about the reading that they had to answer. It could be specifically content related, or it could be reflection based. And then the third type of assignment was online quizzes, which, as we know, not always the best, but they're really simple to administer. So those are the 6 different assignments that we did. Again, motivationally based, we just stuck to this column and we rotated them through. Same thing for content based. And what we did when we did the hybrid, or the combination of the two, the first week we would start with a motivationally based, and the second week would go to a content assignment. So it switched back and forth.
And the way we split it up was in Rae Ette's 2 online courses. One of them did all motivationally based assignments, and the other one did all content based assignments. In my undergrad face-to-face, it was a combo, and in my MATs, it was a combo. Was your MATs also a combo?
Yes.
Yeah. So we kind of wanted to compare by class with the 2 online courses, but the others we did combos.
One of the things that we did too is, at the time we were teaching out of the early childhood program, so the 2 courses that would sort of align at the time, with one we did motivationally and the other. So in the old program, if it was motivationally based, in the new program it was going to be content based. So we just kind of flip-flopped just to see what students had to say.
So here are some of the questions that we asked and some of the results we got that I think turned out to be kind of interesting. So when did the students typically complete their readings? And this was, we wanted to know, were they doing it before class? Were they doing before they had to do an assignment? Were they doing it after class, before a quiz, that kind of thing? So the undergrad face-to-face students said, 53% of them said they completed it before class. And the reason that is particularly interesting is because my readings were always assigned before class, and the expectation always was that they would come to class having read the assignment. So 53% did, 47% did not. The undergrad online, 91% did it before the assignment, which online, the main way they were getting their content was through reading. So the fact that they read at a higher rate makes sense, and they had this assignment they had to complete afterwards that they probably couldn't have done very successfully without reading. So it'd be interesting to know what the grades were on those assignments for those 9% who actually say they didn't read it. For the hybrid courses, in the first course, 90% said they did it before their assignment, and that was because Rae Ette and I sort of structured our classes differently. My class, where they said 57% did it before class, which is course 2, I had the expectation they would read before they came to class, and Rae Ette had it flipped. So the expectation was she would give some of the content in class, and then they were supposed to go and read more about it afterward. So kind of different structure.
She's the 90%.
No, you're the 90%.
No, you are 90% before assignment.
No, you
Oh,
have
sorry.
So-
Go ahead.
But Rae Ette did a little bit of what was in the reading, and then you wanted them to go deeper, and you did none of that, and
So
expected them to do all of
I would have them read before they came to class, and then when they came to class, then we would go over that content that they read about and do activities and applications having to do with that content.
Okay.
So we had a different structure in the way we set up in classes.
So
Yeah.
when you say before class and before assignment,
Mhm.
I get what that means. So in your class was at 57%.
Right.
And they asserted that 57% asserted they did it before class.
Mhm.
So then there's that group that didn't. And so they were using a strategy, I could just come and listen in class and get most of the material anyway.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So then we kind of wanted to know how much time were they actually spending reading. And the undergrads in the face-to-face, 74% of them said they spent 1 to 2 hours a week reading. In the undergrad online, 51% said 2 to 3 hours. So we're giving you the statistics of what the greatest percentage was for each time period. And the grad hybrids, 58% of them said 1 to 2 hours. So we just thought it was kind of interesting and wanted to know, how much time are they actually spending?
Can I ask, what was the range in times that you allowed them to pick? 1 to 2, 3 to 4, or 2 to
0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 5 and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah. Another question that we asked, were you more or less likely to complete a reading if you knew it would be discussed in class? And this was a question I wanted to know because discussion was a big part of what I expected. And so I wanted to know if peer pressure was a good reason. They didn't want to look stupid in class, so they would make sure that they had read. So in the undergrad face-to-face, 90% of them said they were more likely to read if they knew they were going to have to talk about it. So I thought that was super interesting. For the undergrads online, 67% said it didn't impact whether or not they would read. And that, obviously makes sense because it's not face-to-face discussion. And then for the grad hybrids, 87% were more likely to read if it would be discussed. So on that one, to me, it was very clear that the threat of discussion was pretty motivating for students to complete their readings. The second question on this slide, would you have completed readings and assignments if there were no points associated? So we wanted to know could we assign them one of these assignments and not associate points, and would they actually do it? So in the undergrad face-to-face, 42% said they wouldn't have completed the readings or the assignments if there were no points attached. Undergrad online, 75% would have completed both. And again, they're gaining most of their content through reading, so that made sense. The grad hybrids, 39% said they would have read but not completed the assignment, and 33% said they would have done both no matter what. So interesting, the difference between an undergrad and a grad in terms of their motivation to read when there are no points associated. Were you more or less likely to complete readings if there were no assignments associated with it? Undergrad face-to-face, 79% said they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have read if there was no assignment. So I think that's huge when we think about just assigning readings with no expectation of something going along with it. Most of them aren't going to do it. Undergrad online, 73% said they would have read regardless of an accompanying assignment. Again, that content piece. And the grad hybrids said 45% were not likely to complete it, but 42% said they would read regardless. So I thought those were interesting. We asked a few more questions, but these were just the ones that had some interesting outcomes. Which assignment prompted most careful reading? The undergrads face-to-face said 3-2-1. And Rae Ette's going to give you some of their quotes about why they thought that. And undergrad online thought the online quizzes and the reading guides made them read more closely. Where undergrad online motivation-based said 3-2-1. And lastly, the grad hybrid combo said 3-2-1. So the 3-2-1 kept coming up as helping them to read more closely.
So was that like that was an actual assignment that you said, okay, read this and do this 3-2-1 thing and turn it in?
Yep.
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 Yes.
So, go ahead,
okay,
sorry.
Question.
What part of the term were these questions asked?
At the end.
Okay,
Yes.
so you got the benefit of the crunch when they started losing time and getting pressure from others.
Right, yeah.
And at the time we did it because we were going to do this just to see what we just wanted to know, really. So halfway through we just said, maybe we should survey them and see what we can figure out. And so it's nothing that we were trying to wait until the end. It was kind of the timing of it, and we were just really interested in this topic by that point. So.
I was thinking, are you likely to read or not? I'm thinking that probably, I thought that might change over the course of the term.
It may.
Yeah, it may.
Absolutely. So one of the things we did is, besides just asking them to fill out a survey and getting these percentages, we asked them for their anecdotal, their qualitative piece that they wanted to add to this. So one of the students from the early childhood courses that were focused on content wrote, "Upon doing the reading of the quiz, I think there's less learning as you are simply skimming in order to find answers as opposed to reading to truly have an understanding of the information. I believe that the reading guide and questions are more beneficial for this than quizzes." A second student wrote, "I did like the quizzes and reading guides. They prompted me to read more in depth, and I seem to retain information better." So one of the interesting things when we start reading these anecdotal pieces is the students are indicating what they're using to read more in depth. And that's what's really important, because we can tell them, this is what I want you to do, but this is them coming and telling us what they were learning from these opportunities. So that was really exciting for us. For a student in the motivational assessments or assignments, said, I liked the double entry because it allowed for me to get in depth with the reading. I liked the 3-2-1 because it made me think more of my philosophy. Then I liked the facilitation assignment because it gave each student a turn at teaching and using the skills we have acquired throughout this course. So then when we're looking at a combo of the two different types of assignments, they wrote, I also liked how the assignments were not always the same. And so that really led to us really focusing on changing those assignments and keeping that rotation up, and students don't get bored with the type of assignment they're asked to do weekly. Another student wrote, I really love the 3-2-1 assignment format. It allows me to freely read the chapter and look for items that were unique to my interests for the answers. Open-ended questions always get better answers. I always really liked that we submitted them on the discussion board so that we could see what others found interesting or had questions about. It helped me to get to know my peers a little better, as well as give and gain support. And something that we want to take away from that, if a student is feeling they're able to give support, they really have an understanding of that content then. So again, it's a student really applying that learning and putting it out to other students. In that same combination, another student wrote, I like the double entry journal because I enjoyed being able to connect what we were reading to my personal experiences, because I think that connection really helped me see how to apply what we were learning in the classroom. And again, the key word there is apply. We talk about all these things, we talk about these philosophies, but until the students have that opportunity to apply it, that's really what we want them to do. So this was a really great feedback from a student. This is from a graduate level student. They wrote, I like the 3-2-1 assessment, but this was also a combo, excuse me, so they did motivationally and content. I like the 3-2-1 assignment because I could skim through the chapter to gain a surface understanding of the model discussed. Then I could use my own interests within the chapter to guide my responses for a closer reading on the areas of interest. The double entry pushed me to underline/highlight or mark areas of interest. I often reread the section to learn more about the topic or to clarify a section. Something that students don't typically do is reread a section. So a student telling us this is something that they were doing while completing this type of assignment was really exciting. And the last thing for this class, or the last comment was, I like the 3-2-1 because I really had to engross myself in the reading to find those details. When I learned it was just a quiz, I felt myself skimming reading, knowing I could just look for the answers while taking the quiz. And then a final graduate student wrote, I like the 3-2-1 because it provided a good structured way to summarize the main points in the reading. Don't like quizzes? Well, because they're quizzes. And I enjoyed a 3-2-1 because of the structure and the freedom to read the chapter how I wanted to. I did not like the on quizzes because it was an easy way out to just find the answers in the text instead of read for comprehension, just personally. So again, when we hear those comments, students are doing in-depth readings. They're rereading material. They're really focusing in on applying that information as well. So it's really what we're after as instructors. Students are telling us that's what they're doing. So that was very exciting.
And one thing before we go into some of our limitations, that Rae Ette and I both had very differing opinions on which assignments we personally liked best. For instance, I liked the double entry journal, and Rae Ette absolutely hated grading it.
I despised it. It wasn't even hating, it was despising.
Yeah. But I think we graded it a little bit differently, where I might make a random comment, but if it looked like they were providing some thoughtful reflection on that right-hand side, and were asking some good questions, then I might, if it was a genuine question that I had the answer to, then I might answer that question, but I didn't take a lot of time and, very piece by piece comment on everything that they said. So that was part of why I think it maybe was a little easier for me. And I think we did our 3-2-1s a little bit differently. I put mine on discussion board and required their one question to be something that provoked thought from a classmate, and their classmates had to go back and answer that question. So each group member had to go back and answer one group mate's question.
And my question was, on 3-2-1, my one question was, develop a question you would be willing to ask to appear to promote discussion. So instead of doing it, we just got that far. Yes?
Quickly, what were the course levels for the undergraduate? 100, 200, 300?
300.
300 level.
Okay.
And 400, actually. 300 and 400.
So students that should have developed a study habit before, or that have developed their own study and reading habits before, are now actually engaging differently.
Right.
Yeah. Good. So, as of any study, there are always limitations. One of the limitations we are quite aware of is we had really small N. We only had 7 classes participate in this with a total of 80 students. So something we would like to do is continue to do this in different courses. And the nice thing is we have new cohorts that rotate in every year. This is something we're going to be able to do and grow that N. Another one of our limitations is it was just Rhonda and I, which as much fun as we are, we would love for more people to participate in this as well, because we are seeing some really good information come forward from our students. Again, they're reading more in depth, they're participating, they're engaging in that material, and that's really what we want our students to do. One of the additional limitations is that this is a self-reported survey. As we know, all surveys that are self-reported have a little bias in them. Some students may have responded, yes, I will read no matter what, when in reality they may not have. This was a, lost the word, where you can't find out who they are. Anonymous, thank you, sorry. Brain. It was an anonymous survey, but as much as we can say it was anonymous, sometimes people may not think it's anonymous. So that was a couple of the limitations that we had found and one to work on. And then the implications and future research that we would like to continue to do is we would like assignments to accompany readings needed, especially for those undergrads and face-to-face readings. And Rhonda's already said, especially when we want those glazed eyes to actually participate in our conversation, we now know that we have to assign some sort of assignment with those readings.
Or have them do it in class.
One of the things we also talked about is differentiating the points that may be needed for different assignments. And what this talks about is, and at least in my classes, my motivationally based and my content-based assignments were worth the same amount of points. And really what I wanted to do is content assignments, I think, needed to be weighted a little bit heavier than motivationally based assignments. So that's something I would want to differentiate as we move in the forward with this activity. The double journal entries we found did not prompt careful reading, and that was provided to us by our student feedback. And again, we would like some additional classes and faculty needed to help us with understanding all of these different findings. And then changing out some different assignments and switching out, for me, the double entry, and just seeing what other assignments there are that are motivationally based or content based that we could do. We talked about just bringing the readings into class. That could be one way they do it. I was talking to randomly someone on an airplane who said, you know, I have my students just write 10 minutes about any topic that they write about. So that's something we could add in to our classes as well. So just changing up these different types of activities that students are doing. That being said, are there any questions? Yes.
I want to ask, I have 2 questions. The first one is sort of maybe a general question to everybody, and it's an impression thing, and I don't think you got to it in your survey. But do you think the students that aren't reading, are they coming to class expecting to be told what's in the reading, and that's why they're not doing the reading? And is that then something that we need to change as instructors, and not chalk and talk as much, but figure out another way how to engage them in the content? So that's the first one, and that's maybe a philosophical kind of thing. And the other one, and I think we all recognize that there's a demographic difference between online and on-campus students. And did you capture any of that demographic difference? And could that explain some of the, other than that online students have to get their learning from content reading? But any thoughts about that?
Did we do any demographics?
I don't think we did. We could go back and look it up. We didn't do on hand just because that wasn't where we were starting. This was our starting point for our study. One of the things I want to talk about is your first comment and your philosophy. I think one of the things we need to do is really make students aware of our expectations of when you come to class, I'm not going to go over this reading. I expect you to come prepared. So it's really making that known to students so they're not coming to us saying, but I thought we were going to do this in class, and really being upfront and changing maybe some of those expectations that we have that we're not sharing with our students and they're expecting us to do. So being really clear about that is, I think, one way we combat that situation.
I think it's instrumental if you ever consider the concept of flipping
Oh, yeah.
classes, and then it's critical that they do the reading, or that you have some assignments that they get into the reading, so that in the context of the classroom, the flipping can happen.
Yep.
Otherwise, you can't flip because they're not up with you, and
Right.
you can't get that thing.
And I
so-
think the question earlier about when the survey was given, that would be interesting to look at if the survey was given, say, in week 2, and then again at the end when they've then seen what the expectation is in the class. Because I know for me as a student, particularly undergrad, there were certain courses that I started out doing all the readings and then realized I didn't need to because it was all going to be happening in class. So I quit reading. So I think the survey at different points would be interesting,
would.
depending on course expectations.
Right. If you have
Or
questions,
structure.
give me a second just to come around and hand you the mic.
So one of the things that always seems to happen in any class that I've taught, if you assign readings, then you want to do some sort of reflection so that then the students have something they have to do. And the tyranny that goes along with that is that we have to grade it.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And Alan and I
There's
went to Greenwood Elementary to visit a student, and I looked over, and she had a book that I use in math education on her shelf, and she used it as a reference book, which is exactly what I want my students to do, and I realized that a lot of them do that. And so I used a different strategy because I didn't really like grading, but I wanted the students to be accountable. I started requiring that they read the chapters, and they had to read a lot of chapters, and I required that they had to underline and annotate their book. So they had evidence that they read, and then I would sit down with them for a couple of minutes and go over the book with them and ask them questions about it. And that seemed to make them really accountable for the reading and doing it. And I tried to sell it because it was important. And it it almost completely made the grading tyranny go away, because I could grade it really quickly, and I had evidence that they were reading it, and I sold them the idea that they should take the book with them.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a
that
good
sort
idea.
of worked well for me.
I did find motivationally based assignments for me take a lot longer to grade because they're giving me their reflection and their feedback that I feel like I need to comment on everything. So it takes me a much longer to grade those. As much as they do it and they have comments, I have to give them all points because they finished the assignment and they did the part of tell me what it is and reflect on it. If they did that, I have to give them all the points because that's the assignment. Versus a content-based assignment where if it's a quiz, it's graded on Canvas, it's done, it's 13.5 points, or it's however many points. So that's kind of part of that discussion of why I said at the end, one of the things we need to do is really consider about the points for each of the assignments. But two, when you're talking about motivation-based versus content-based, man, content-based is real quick to grade. Because it's online, or there's keys that you follow, or it's done just on Canvas. So that's one of the things when designing your assignments is something to keep in mind as well.
Hi, I had a question and a comment. My first question is, what kind of readings? What genre of readings? Are they all textbook readings, or are there different kinds of genres being included?
Mine were either textbook or journal articles.
Okay.
So that's what I had.
Same, because and mine is because it's part of that elementary group. We're getting those practicing teachers ready, so
Okay.
it's very content-based.
And then my comment is, I like double entry journals sort of in general, but I think one thing they do tend to focus on is they sort of atomize the reading into little chunks. And I worry that students don't get the scope of the reading when they're doing stuff like that. And so maybe it's worth blending summary with double entry, so that they're so that they're doing the large picture and then little small atomized pieces of it.
Yeah.
That would be a way too of not having to comment on every single one of their personal reflections, because that's one of the things I didn't like about it is every time they had a quote they reflected, I felt like I had to have a comment, And when each student has 7 of those, and I'm commenting every single one, and it's a short paragraph or a long paragraph for each comment, it took me a really long time to grade. So doing something like that would really speed that process up, and maybe I wouldn't despise it as much.
Well, I had another thought about the double entry journal too, and I did not do this, but I may try it, to do it as a discussion board, and then their partners have to comment on what they said or answer one of their questions or something like that, instead of it being me so intensive. That way, that might help with that too. But I like the idea of including a summary, because I think you're right. They tend to pick, oh, that's a nice quote, but maybe they didn't really get the big picture.
Ray, I was going to say that if you don't have a student that has a hearing impairment, an audio feedback might be a way to get through those reflections a lot quicker.
Yep.
And give them the kind of feedback that is sort of, it's a little off the cuff. It's less structured in writing, but I could see the same thing. Oh man, I got 7 comments here, or quotes, or reflections. I need to make some type of general response to each one.
And a lot of times it's because what you had said, they don't really go together. They're just random quotes that a student liked. So it's really hard to get where I can summarize this into one. So you have to kind of comment on each one. So I think changing that would really, like you're saying, it would really be able to make just one comment about the assignment versus 7 individual comments.
Hold on, Tanya.
I've never done this, but I just thought of it. I've had a lot of coffee too, so beware. Have you ever thought of grouping your discussion board in subcategories where they post according to the pages they selected their quotes from, so you have an ongoing? So these pages are posting here, and these pages. And the reason I ask that is because I use, as you know, double entry quite a bit in a face-to-face class I teach, but then we sit down and go through it and really critically analyze the whole chapter together. And I find that it really generates a lot of excellent discussion, and they feel accountable because they know they're going to be called out to share. And I think the same goes if they're posting in like categories. That might help. I don't know what logistically that looks like, maybe a nightmare, but you could try it.
Yeah, you can try anything once.
As Tanya, you were saying that, I thought, what if you put students into groups of 4 to 5, and then you assigned each of them a section of the text or readings to do, and have them do 3, 2, 1 in a discussion board, and the other people had to respond in some way to the different sections. So I think logistically it becomes difficult to grade something like that, but it engages them in not just their one section deeply, but in what other people are writing and reading as well.
I liked using the student summary for that, where the students read the entire thing and they had to summarize it, because then they were in charge of that. So they really had that in-depth understanding of that chapter, because then they were required to go and talk to each of the students, and when a student responded to their questions, they had to go respond again. So it was supposed to replicate a conversation. And that it really led to students really participating deeply in that, and of course there was points associated. So if you didn't respond back to the student who responded to your initial question, you didn't get all the points. So it was probably point motivated, but still students were doing it, and I was happy.
Yeah, the only anecdotal comment we got about that assignment was it was frustrating when the person who was in charge that week didn't post on time. And those people who have set aside this time to do their work, and then they couldn't because it wasn't there yet. That was the only major comment we got about that one.
As someone who's grading, it's also hard, because when someone doesn't do that initial post and the peers can't respond to that, you can't penalize the students who were supposed to respond to that. So what are you going to do grading wise? And that was something logistically we had to figure out, and it took some really knowing your students and who was going to participate, and you knew who was not going to participate in certain parts, and modifying those groupings. So really knowing your students is one of the ways of combating that.
Another thing that I've been doing, this is not my presentation, Steve, but I'm just giving a little bit of feedback, because I have a really, really small methods class. And so really engaging them with the reading, with the 3-2-1s. I make them answer each other's their questions
That's what I
every
do
week,
too.
and they have to support it with evidence. So that's another approach, especially with smaller classes, to get them engaged with each other. And then usually I comment on their 3s or 2s and leave the 1s up to everyone else.
Yeah.
This is probably a rhetorical question, but I'm wondering whether it really ever changes. In other words, we're talking about students, and I wonder if it ever changes in adulthood. And the only thing I can draw from is I've wrote a lot of expectations, a lot of action items for adults that involve, you know, reading a project scope, reading something, a policy, come prepared to talk about it, and it doesn't sound like it's any different. You know,
Right.
it's the same
I'd have to
thing.
admit. Yeah.
And so what drives me to wonder about that is I think about the possibility of looking at if you've ever heard about the 6 sources of influence, trying to figure out why they don't read. And immediately we go to, or we try to blame things on personal motivation. That's why people don't do things. And normally that's wrong. It's usually something else that's prohibiting them. And I can think about my college days. I'm not a good reader. My comprehension's really bad. And so I relied on being in front of the teacher every minute I could. Every classroom, wrote detailed notes, poured over my notes. And in one time I even challenged my wife more. My wife challenged me. She says, you can't pass sociology, or you can't get an A in sociology without buying the book. And I said, I bet I can. And I did it. And so all I'm trying to say is there may be other reasons why they're not reading, and it may be because they're not good readers.
Right.
There may be structural components that's keeping them from reading. They got the same demands that the adults have, and they've got a job and kids to feed and don't have the time to read.
And we find that in all of our classes. I mean, we have numerous students that have children or have second jobs or multiple jobs, and while they're going to school. So that is one of those barriers that we are aware of. But as an education institution, we have these requirements that or expectations that students need to come prepared to class. And I think one of the ways of making sure those happen is telling them this is our expectation, and then sometimes putting points to it. Because people tend to do things when there's consequences involved.
Right.
We go to work because there's a paycheck at the end of the day. I mean, this is really, there's a consequence. It's a positive consequence, but same thing with assignments. You do the assignment, you get the points. So.
I'm curious about how many credits were associated with each of those classes that you took data from, and how the number of hours they spent reading compared to the Carnegie units that would be associated with them.
Oh, that would be really interesting to look at. I want to say mine were both 3-credit courses. It was development and 3 credits, and then the MAT class also development.
But that would have been
probably
during
2.
winter term.
It was fall term,
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, fall term.
so 2 credits.
2 credits. So the graduate classes that we combined were 2 credits, and then all of the early childhood courses that I taught were 3 credits each.
Yeah. But it would be interesting to look more closely at that, what they reported.
I have just some thoughts on extension. I think this is fascinating, and if there's some way I could play a part, I'd like to do this in a business class, to see how students might differ across curriculums. But 2 extensions that came to mind long-term would be apply this in a 100 level class, and then track the students.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And see if there's any implication for them over time. And then the other one was across curriculum, or across subject areas, and see how that plays.
Yeah.
And I think also tracking the demographics.
Right.
We recognize that online students have to get their knowledge from the content that we place and the textbooks that we use. And so it's critical that we select good books for them to do that.
Right.
But if we're using the same books in a classroom, how do we get the students into them they're selected specifically for students who have to learn from that.
Right.
more,
Right.
so. Well, as has happened numerous times this year during Colloquium, I've picked up ideas that I need to play out in a different way. If no one else has any questions, we can wrap it up and help yourself to goodies in the back. And let's give Rhonda and Rae Ette a round of applause.
Thank you for coming this afternoon and
Yes,
spending your time
thank
with
you
us.
so much.
Enjoy your day. It's beautiful out.